I've got that all fitting. It's ready to weld in place. You'll notice I drilled some holes here. I drilled a hole here, and I drilled a hole here. And what that's going to be for, after I weld this piece in, I will roll the car over, and I'll put epoxy, just like this epoxy. I'll put it in the hole, take a little straw basically in a funnel and pour it down so it pours in the back side of this and just coats this whole thing. I'll pour it in there until it comes out of this hole. And then I like to take a air hose and blow it in on this side and just kind of blow air through there, and that pushes that epoxy all the way up into the edge. So it's, I'm confident that the back side of it's covered really well along with this piece. And then I'll pour some more in there. I probably go a little overboard on the epoxy, but I fill that all in really nice, and I'll show you how that's done later. So Dylan and I have gotten this to this point. He works a day a week or so. He's been very helpful so far, and today I'm going to, he's not here today, but today I'm going to go ahead and weld this piece in. I'll sand it off and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, she's all welded in. It's flat across here. Time to grind the welds down and finish it. Okay, so I just finished sanding my welds off, and that looks pretty good. I'm gonna epoxy it, then put a skim coat across there. I'll show you. What I try to do is get this, hopefully that's picking up in the camera. That contour fits very nicely there. So all the way across, lays good. So I ground it off with a grinding disc or a cut-off disc and get my welds so they're laying flat. Same thing with this. I just finished this one up as well. So you can see that's all one plane now. So epoxy those and keep working on all these little, we got a few little dents here and there, and do this one next. See here, I've drilled a hole in this as well so I can squeeze epoxy up under there. There's a piece here. Dylan's been working on these pieces, so he's got that piece made, and we'll weld those two in. Maybe he'll be here tomorrow, and I'm gonna turn him loose on one of these two places here. So Dylan was working on this. He's got his piece welded in here, and it looks pretty good, but you've got a little bit more work to do here. So you see how this is low where you welded it? I usually will take a cutoff saw and get in here and clean that up a little bit more. You might have to take and weld along this edge and fill that in better. We want to try to get this laying as level as we can here. So let me lay this down. So see, that's all pretty good right there, isn't it? Starts getting a little deep right in here. You see that? See how deep it is right there? Can you see it in the camera? You start getting a little deep there, and it's a little bit rocky, but it's not too bad for the first time. Is that better than what you did at Anthony's Career Center? For sure. Yeah. So practice, you know, it just takes practice to get these to where they look really good, or as good as you can get them. They're never going to be perfect. You always want to skim coat this when we're done. But you can see how lumpy it is here. Yeah. The other thing you got to be careful of, I could see that you've been sanding on the sheet metal that you put in here. So you want to be, you want to try to not do that too much, because the thickness of that is less than the thickness of this ruler. And so the more you sand on that, the worse, I mean, the thinner it's going to get. And eventually, if you're not careful, as you sand on this, you'll start seeing this turning blue. Have you ever seen it turn blue?
Yeah, that's when you get thin.
Yeah, you're getting thin. So once you get that blue look to it, you might have already went too much. You may have to cut it out. You might have to cut it out and redo it. So you just got to be careful about doing that. So that's why I try to take, I try to fit these seams as good as you can. We talked about that earlier, and weld it. You know, taking your time welding, jumping around here and cooling it so it doesn't start warping on you. But when you get that bead around here of your weld, focus on that. Sand it like this. Go right along that edge. Don't get out into here or out into here, because you're thinning this metal up again. So you just got to be really cautious about that. But again, go ahead and clean this up a little bit more. You might have to do a little more welding on here, and then this will be ready to coat with epoxy, and then we'll skim coat it. Cool. Okay. Earlier I showed this wheel well, and this flange was tucked up. It was rolled over just like the front ones are on a fender on a Boss 302. And we don't know exactly why that was done, if the guy had wider tires or whatever. But regardless, it was rolled in, and it was rolled in tight. And so what we did is Dylan cut relief cuts in here about every 4 or 5 inches all the way around this whole fender or opening. And then he was able to pull this back with a pair of pliers, get it somewhat straight, and then he went back and welded those spots. But the problem is it's just way too deep.
Yeah,
this isn't going to work. So what we'll probably end up doing is cutting this along this edge here, because unfortunately you got 2 pieces of metal. You got the wheel well and then the quarter panel, and they lip up over here and they're welded together, so you can't get that dent. I mean, the way that's bent in there, it's just about impossible to get that out without cutting it. So I think what we'll end up doing is we'll take
new.
Yes, take a saw right along that edge, and we'll cut this out, and we'll make a new flange. But what we want to try to do is keep this and duplicate it, because if you see right here,
oh yeah, here's 2. That's an alignment area. So from the factory, they had a pin in there, I assume, and that aligned the inside with the outside. So we want to try to duplicate this the best we can. If you get this cut out, I think you could probably get this dent out a little bit better here as well. We have to, our new piece, we're going to want to roll the edge a little bit, because there's a radius on here. We don't want a square edge when we're done. So that'll be a project that you need to start on at some point here.